I didn't expect anything to go wrong that day. I was sitting at my desk, enjoying the coffee my assistant, Rachel, had just set down. Sure, it had artificial sweetener again, which I hated, but I half-jokingly told her I'd switch to black tea if she kept doing that. My mind was tangled up with a copyright issue that desperately needed sorting out, but the government was dragging its heels, as usual. Their notorious inefficiency was stalling everything, and I couldn't help but wonder how many desks a simple document had to cross before anything got done. I felt stuck, unable to push forward with my next project, and the looming financial hit wasn't making it easier. These days, it seemed like political correctness had turned even the simplest jobs into uphill battles, leaving me feeling more out of touch than ever. Rachel walked in and broke my thoughts. "There's a young lady here to see you," she announced, handing me a photo. She wouldn't give her name, but wanted me to give you this. I took the picture from Rachel, and an uneasy feeling crept over me. Why now? I thought. The photo was of me and Diana, my ex-wife, on our wedding day 18 years back. The memories hit me like a punch: betrayal, hurt, and humiliation. People had assumed I came back to town to lick my wounds, and they weren't wrong. Back then, I was green when it came to money and power, but that was in the past. "Find out if she's either Ginger or Ella Quinn," I instructed, handing Rachel a USB drive in a Ziploc bag. "If she's either of them, show her the video on this drive. If she asks, give her everything on it, but bring back the original." At 42, I had made peace with being single. My brief marriage to Diana Mae Thompson had left me unable to trust easily. People had to prove themselves to me now, which wasn't a simple task. I'm 6 feet 4 inches with a 38-inch waist and a solid 200 pounds from hitting the gym after work. My dark brown hair is starting to go gray, but I still catch eyes here and there. I keep it casual with women these days. Marriage and love aren't on the table anymore. An hour later, Rachel returned with the young woman, who seemed dead set on getting answers. She sat down across from me, her green eyes sharp and unyielding, like she wouldn't budge until she knew everything. "Do you know which one it is?" I asked. "Ella," she replied. "Who is she, and why does she seem so upset?" She broke down, saying we've all been lied to our whole lives. If she's right, I've been lied to as well. Ella is one of identical twins. What you saw in that video were her mother's last words to me, right before our first divorce hearing, 7 months before the twins were even born. I didn't hear about them from their mother. I found out from other people. The files on the drive explain what would happen if I tried to reach out to them. Her father, who worked for the CIA, made sure I was fired from the FBI with trumped-up charges. The man despised me. According to those papers, there's even a contract on my life if I interfere. She left me to marry my so-called best friend, who she'd been seeing for months. As far as I know, he's the father of those twins. How did she find me? And what does she want? I asked, trying to piece things together. Ella found an old photo in her attic with your name on it, Googled you, and recognized you. She also came across the original marriage certificate and divorce papers. She tracked you down online, looking for a bone marrow match for her twin sister, who's running out of time. Why would she come to me? I'm not their father. It doesn't make any sense, I replied, frustrated. Their mother was with their father months before I met her. He made sure of that. Ella got suspicious and convinced the doctors to do a DNA test while they were testing her for the bone marrow match. Turns out Mr. Quinn isn't their biological father. What do you think? Rachel asked, watching me closely with a hint of a smile as my emotions began to show. If Ella was telling the truth, it meant my ex had lied all those years ago. I might actually be their father. The moment I saw her, I knew she was related to you, Rachel said. She just has that look. Are you ready for what might be the biggest shock of your life, Jack? Send the information on the drive to my publishers. Tell them to release it in a way that can't be traced back to me, and not to mention my pen name, because my life might still be in danger. Make sure they understand it needs to go public immediately. Then get someone to run a fast DNA test and make an appointment. If it turns out I'm their father, I need hard evidence when I confront her mother. If this is true, I'll need a litigation lawyer to fight for my rights as their father. Clear my calendar. I need to get to Ginger's hospital as soon as possible. I paused. Now I need to find Ella. Ella, come in and introduce yourself, Rachel called. When Ella walked in, I knew instantly. She looked exactly like my little sister did at 16. I felt my throat tighten as emotions rushed up. Both of us ended up crying. Rachel quickly took a few photos, capturing a moment that was changing everything before she left us alone. Ella, you have an appointment for blood work at 1. They promised to rush the results, and I put it on the company card, Rachel said, coming back in. I also arranged for you to meet Heidi at a restaurant at 3. She's made arrangements for her kids, so she'll be fully present. Heidi already knows there's important family news. I stood there, my heart a mess, watching Ella. I had so many questions, but couldn't find the words. I hugged her tight as Rachel closed the door. It was hard to wrap my head around the idea that I might actually be a father. Ella was trembling as we left, and it felt like she might be feeling the same way. We tried to take things slowly, like baby steps, to make sense of it all. After setting up the clinic to send the report by email, we headed out for a late lunch. I learned that Ella had skipped school, driving all night until she finally had to stop to rest at a gas station. I was angry she'd done something so reckless, but I bit back my words, realizing I might already be acting like an overprotective dad. It reminded me of the crazy things I used to do at her age. When we got to the restaurant, I noticed Heidi's car. I know we're here to meet your sister, but why did Rachel set this up without consulting you first? Ella asked. You're about to see what Rachel and I saw the first time we met you, I explained. It's the reason we believe you and Ginger are my daughters, and why I was floored when the test results came back positive. Can I call you Dad? Ella asked with a hopeful smile. I laughed, feeling a warmth spread through me. I'd like that a lot. Cell's was a cozy family restaurant, a step up from Red Lobster, with a reputation for great food and an inviting atmosphere. The owner led us to our private booth immediately. I ordered a bottle of champagne and extra tissues. Heidi sat with her back to us, and I gestured for Ella to wait while I approached her. Hey sis, thanks for meeting me, I said, coming up beside her. Heidi looked up, her expression softening. You seem happy. What's going on? She asked. Heidi, stand up. There's someone I want you to meet, I replied, as Ella came forward. This is Diana's daughter, Ella. Heidi turned, and her face froze, staring as if she was looking into a mirror of her younger self. They shared the same features. Long brunette hair, high cheekbones, small ears, light blue eyes, and warm smiles. Oh my God, Heidi gasped, clearly stunned. Albert, you could have given me some warning. I can hardly believe it. How long have you known about her? About 5 hours, Ella said, her voice thick with emotion. I surprised him at his office. Rachel and Dad figured it out immediately. And now, seeing you, I can understand why. The server discreetly handed us some tissues, recognizing we needed a private space, and Heidi, still tearing up, asked the hostess to move us to a larger table. She then urgently called her husband, insisting he come over right away, and notified our parents, telling them it was a family emergency. Mom, naturally worried, asked what was going on, but Heidi just said it was too complicated to explain over the phone. The tension in the air was almost palpable, with emotions running high and nerves on edge. Just as we started to settle in and share our first glass of champagne, a message from Rachel popped up. The publisher had released the story, and it would hit the 6 o'clock news broadcast. Moments later, Heidi's husband and our parents walked in. My dad, always one to make an entrance, boomed, "There'd better be a damn good reason for all this." Heidi and I got up to greet them. "Mom, Dad Mike," Heidi announced, beaming with pride, "I'd like you to meet Diana's daughter, Ella Quinn." Mom took one look at Ella, and her face lit up instantly. She'd always wanted a granddaughter. Dad, however, was visibly taken aback, momentarily at a loss for words. After a long pause, he finally managed, "Well, the resemblance is there, but this is still quite a shock." Mom, too choked up to speak, sat beside Ella and held her hand, gripping it as if she'd never let go. Meanwhile, Dad, clearly moved, ordered 2 more bottles of champagne to keep the celebration going. Once our glasses were topped off, I stood, clearing my throat. "I need to explain," I began, and Ella, capturing the moment, started recording on my phone. I laid out how Ella and I had met and filled them in on the whirlwind events of the day. When I finished, Dad stood up, Ella, he said, voice trembling with emotion. We don't need any DNA test to know what's obvious. Welcome to our family. You've got 2 more aunts eager to meet you, so don't you ever think you're anything less than one of us. Ella took the phone and spoke directly into it. I came here looking for the truth, unsure of what I'd find. Today has changed everything for Dad and me. Neither of us had any clue until today. Meeting Aunt Heidi showed me what real, unconditional love is. And I can't wait to tell my twin sister Ginger. She's going to be over the moon. As I looked around the table, every face showed the same mix of happiness and disbelief. Even Dad, usually so stoic, had tears glistening in his eyes. Mom held up 2 fingers, crying even harder, and I made sure to capture everyone's joyful tears before stopping the recording. Ella entered her and her sister's contact information into my phone and quickly texted Ginger, showing me the video she sent along. Her message read, "If what we think is true, the DNA test will confirm it. Watch the 6 o'clock news tonight. Love, your twin." Mom, still in a state of disbelief, asked to see more proof. Ella pulled up photos of herself and Ginger, and Mom insisted on downloading copies to her laptop, proudly displaying them on the screen for everyone. Ella then turned off her phone and tucked it away, and that's when I realized nobody likely knew where she was. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was Ginger. Excusing myself, I moved to a quieter corner to take the call. Dad's gaze followed, noting the tears welling up in my eyes as I answered. Ella, picking up on the moment, mouthed, "It's my sister." Dad nodded knowingly, and I took a deep breath. "Hello, this is Ginger," the voice on the other end said, trembling slightly. "I had a call after watching that video. Ella won't be home until at least 7 o'clock. She's stopping by the police station for an update on her situation. I'm pretending I don't know anything. The police left a card at our place earlier. What should I do? Get him to tune in to the 6 o'clock news and pay attention to what comes up about me. Tell him you'll talk once your parents aren't around and then show him the video. Give him my number and tell him to text me first. He'll get it after watching the broadcast," I advised. "Once we have the DNA results, Ella and I might bring the whole family." "What do you mean?" Ginger asked, still sounding uncertain. After explaining Ella's efforts, I replied, "Once this family knows the truth, they won't let you go. I don't know how many of us will show up, but you'd better believe everyone who can will." "Why?" she questioned, disbelief clear in her voice. "In the Roberts family, blood runs deep. And if I'm not a match, someone else might be." "Just like that?" she asked, sounding almost in awe. "No question about it. You'll see soon enough." I chuckled, trying to reassure her. "We might be strangers now, but that won't last long." We spoke a little more before she hung up, her voice soft with relieved sobs. After we ordered dinner, I filled the family in on why Ella had come. Phones immediately buzzed as family members spread the word, rallying to find potential bone marrow matches. Mom, naturally, took charge, coordinating everything like she was planning a grand event. "How did you get here, Ella?" my dad asked, looking curious. "I drove my old '94 Voyager. It's barely holding together," Ella admitted with a laugh. "It's parked in Dad's lot. First thing tomorrow, bring that van over to my dealership," he said firmly. "I'm not letting you drive back in that rust bucket. It's a miracle you made it here in one piece." I chuckled, teasing him. "Dad, at her age, you weren't much more practical. She's got determination, though. What are you planning to give her?" "She can pick out a new one," he replied with a wink. "If it's my choice, I'd go for a 4x4, Ella said, grinning. "I love the outdoors." Dad's smile grew wider. "Perfect. We're an outdoors family ourselves. If the weather allowed it, we'd be out fishing, camping, or hunting." He launched into stories of my summers learning to water ski and going barefoot on the lake, reminiscing as if holding court. Both Mom and Dad insisted Ella stay with them for the night, making it clear it wouldn't look right for her to stay with me. After dinner, Dad drove them to her van and then brought it home himself, with Mom already brimming with excitement, planning all the ways she'd spoil her new granddaughter. Dad ended up staying awake until 1 a.m. just waiting for them to settle in. Around 10 p.m., a call came in from the police investigator. It had taken him 2 hours to run a background check on me, and now he was calling with questions about the media buzz surrounding the information I'd released. We discussed the situation at length, and he mentioned that seeing the 3 generations in that video had answered a lot of his questions. I assured him that we were working on expedited DNA tests to confirm the relationship and that Ella was with my parents for the night. Once we got the results, we'd see if I could be a match for Ginger. I asked him to buy us some time and promised I'd keep him updated. Later, Ginger told me he'd reported back to her about our conversation. I realized that this time, facing my past wasn't as intimidating as it once had been. With the truth, the courts, and the media on my side, I wasn't about to let Diana's family intimidate me with their power and influence. This wasn't about revenge. I just wanted justice, plain and simple. I was ready to take on anything or anyone, whether it was Diana's family or the federal government. The next morning, I was back in my office, making sure my schedule wouldn't be thrown off and setting up tasks for Rachel to manage while I was away. Rachel, bless her, was practically hovering, checking emails like a concerned mother, prying for details about my day, and absorbing every bit of information. Truth be told, I didn't mind one bit. Rachel Harris had been stunning in her youth, and even now, she was still a striking woman. Her naturally styled brown hair framed soft features, and her sharp emerald eyes and full lips had an undeniable allure. As a single man, I often admired Rachel, thankful she never caught me staring. She had a certain charm that was hard to ignore, and working so closely with her, I knew it was best to keep those thoughts to myself. Finally, though, she called my attention back to reality with a voice filled with excitement. She had just printed the DNA results and exclaimed, "It's official. You're her father." Without hesitation, Rachel called the lab to ensure the DNA confirmation was sent immediately to Ginger's specialist. Then, as efficiently as always, she began looking for the toughest litigation lawyer in New York. After vetting a handful, she set up a Skype call with the best candidate, who, impressed by the evidence we had, agreed to take on the case on a percentage basis. He was confident this was a clear win. With DNA proof in hand, we'd go after my ex-wife, her husband, and even her parents for robbing me of my parental rights all these years. The restrictive court orders that had kept me away could finally be dismantled, proving the manipulation and deception they'd all used to control the situation. Even the supposed contract on my life, whether real or not, would serve to show their attempts to intimidate me, to keep me in check. The lawyers saw this as a major case, even without taking the government into account. I told Rachel to send a dusty gray box from the safe to my new lawyer. Inside was crucial evidence that Diana's father had tried to tear apart both my career and my marriage. Gathering these records had taken years, hacking through layers of red tape and bureaucratic walls. Eventually, a police officer had leaked a video, changing the narrative into one of a runaway daughter finding her biological father to save her sister. A story the media devoured. "Mom, it's confirmed," I said over the phone, voice thick with relief. "I have 2 daughters. Be ready to leave by 7 a.m. from the car lot. I'll notify everyone." "Did you get in touch with your sisters?" she asked, her voice crackling with emotion. We hit the road, driving a fully loaded 2-year-old Ford Explorer, making our way to Igo, New York. Ella and I led the caravan, with my parents in a tour bus right behind us, joined by a convoy of 33 other vehicles filled with family and friends, all driving up to support Ginger. Just as we got moving, my phone buzzed. Ella answered and put it on speaker. "CNN is tracking you," Ginger informed us after we exchanged greetings. "There's a tour bus with a banner that says the Robertses are coming. 1 out of 141 should be a match," Ella replied. "We have the DNA test proving he's our father. I'm in the Explorer he got me. Dad said if the test came back positive, a lot of family would show up, but I never imagined this," Ginger said, her voice alive with hope. "It's given me a feeling I can't remember ever having. Today, I met so many relatives. It'll take me ages to remember all the names. First cousins, second cousins, even third cousins. I'm so proud. I want to change my last name to Roberts," Ella declared with confidence. "I never knew families like this existed. I was so overwhelmed I nearly drove off the road," she laughed. "I decided I have to write about all this for my next book." The girls continued to talk, sharing their amazement at everything happening, When Ginger said she had to go, her mother had just walked in. "Dad, are you okay?" Ella asked, noticing my eyes glistening. "How could I be anything else?" I answered, voice rough with emotion. "I've discovered I have 2 daughters, both kept from me, raised by my ex-wife and an ex-friend I never could have trusted. One is vibrant and full of life, and the other is fighting for hers. I see so much of myself in you, Ella. You're strong and determined. You move mountains without a second thought. And you want to carry my name." My voice cracked as the pride and loss hit me all at once. "Ella," I went on, "I was so caught up trying to save Ginger that I never thought how this all must be affecting you. I know I brought a storm into your life. Can you forgive me?" "Forgive you?" She laughed. "For coming into my life and turning it inside out? Dad, that's what life is about. You've given everyone here someone new to love. You've given me a chance to have a real father." She was crying too now, and it only made my tears fall faster. "Your parents adore you, Dad. Mom keeps seeing herself in me, and it means the world to her. You and Ginger are her new favorites, and she says it's your birthright. She's been spoiling us. If she bought me something, she got one for Ginger too. She's making up for lost time. That's my mom." I chuckled. "Good luck getting any distance from her now. Trust me, I've tried. And Heidi, well, she'll be sharing this story for years. This will become family legend." We soon learned that the moment Diana saw the live news feed of our caravan's arrival, she began suffering from severe panic attacks. The lies she'd built her life around were beginning to crumble, and she knew it. Empowered by the truth, Ginger confronted her mother immediately. "Mom, why did you keep the truth about our real dad from us?" Ginger demanded. When Diana gave no answer, Ginger pushed harder. "You made all these decisions for us, without our say, without even Dad's. What gave you the right to play God with our lives? If Ella hadn't sought him out, would you have let me die?" Diana sat in silence, blindsided. She'd never thought this day would come, or that her daughters would ever piece together the truth. Her father had hated me from the beginning and had done everything in his power to destroy me. Just then, Ginger's doctor walked in. "We received DNA from a man who tested positive as Ginger's biological father. He'll be here tomorrow afternoon, under security for his protection, and there's a good chance he's a match for Ginger," the doctor said before stepping out. Ginger turned to her mother. "Mom, my real dad is coming, and he's bringing 140 others just in case he isn't a match. He wants to give me a chance to survive." "Why?" Diana asked, her voice hollow. "To him and his family, blood matters. Even if I'm a stranger to them, I'm family, and family comes first." Ginger pulled up a video on her phone. "You had to know that I look just like his mother. Watch this. It proves everything." Diana couldn't deny it. The family resemblance across 3 generations was unmistakable. The truth was right there in front of her, and her carefully woven lies were unraveling. Moments later, a man appeared at the entrance of Ginger's room, looking straight at Diana. When she acknowledged him, he handed her a large legal envelope. "You've been served," he said, then walked away. Diana fell to her knees, sobbing, but Ginger, fueled by anger and hurt, watched without a shred of pity. "Mom, why did Grandpa put a contract on my real dad's life?" Ginger demanded, knowing she wouldn't get an answer. Elsewhere, Stanley Quinn had just left a corporate meeting when he, too, was served with legal papers. Stunned, he sat down in the reception area to read them. The first document was a lawsuit against him and his wife for denying me my rightful role as the girl's father. The second suit was against his in-laws and himself for conspiring to ruin my career and destroy my marriage. I was demanding sole custody of my daughters, arguing that if Ella hadn't tracked me down, I'd have never known they existed. I claimed they'd morally abandoned me and would have let Ginger die to keep their secrets buried. With the media storm picking up, disproving this would be nearly impossible. Stanley couldn't help but remember our college days back when we'd been roommates and football teammates. We'd both pursued Diana back then, but she'd chosen me, and he'd even been my best man at the wedding. But Diana's father had despised me from the start. Diana's father had always been determined to keep me out of her life, even back when we first got married. He convinced Stanley to go after her, and Stanley, being eager to get in her father's good graces, didn't hesitate. With her father's influence, I was frequently buried in FBI assignments, leaving Diana and Stanley with more and more alone time. Eventually, things went as he'd planned. Diana and Stanley became lovers while I was out on an undercover operation that lasted 2 months. Her father had recorded their affair, and the day I returned, he threw that evidence in my face, practically daring me to do something about it. Diana, unaware she was even pregnant, assumed her missed periods were from stress. Her father couldn't have been happier when I filed for divorce on the spot. When the twins were born, it was plain as day that I was their father. But Diana's father had already spread false accusations, getting me thrown out of the FBI in disgrace. Clearing my name took 4 years, and by then, I'd left the area under a cloud of rumors and judgment. Meanwhile, Diana married Stanley, and they had 2 children. In time, the full truth emerged. Unedited tapes exposing the conspiracy Diana's father and Stanley had orchestrated to shatter our marriage. Stanley couldn't stop wondering how Diana would react once the story came to light. After an exhausting 14-hour drive, Ella and I finally pulled into our last stop of the night around 9 p.m. We ordered a light meal to the room, barely stayed awake to eat it, and crashed for a few hours before the 5 a.m. wake-up call jolted us up. I had a private meeting arranged with a local police officer and an FBI representative. Ella dropped me off at the Igo Police Department, where I met Detective Thomas Grant and FBI agent Ryan Davis. For the next hour and a half, we combed through the evidence against Diana's father, sharing my lawyer's contact info and handing over a USB drive with the critical proof I'd gathered. Under official protection now, I headed to the hospital where they drew my blood to see if I could be a bone marrow donor for Ginger. As I approached Ginger's private room, I overheard Ella and Ginger chatting. A nurse recognized me as an author, and I signed a book for her before heading inside. The moment Ella saw me, she called out, "Dad." Ginger looked frail, her skin loose and pale, showing just how close she was to the end. But despite it all, she wore a huge smile, her eyes bright with a glimmer of hope. "Ginger, they're expediting the tests," I told her, trying to keep my voice steady. "We'll know in about 30 minutes. The rest of the family's checking into hotels, and my parents are getting their bone marrow drawn as we speak. If there's more than one match, they're planning a double transplant, one for each arm." Ginger broke down in tears. I sat at her bedside, holding her hand as she gradually calmed. Ella, beaming with pride, snapped a photo of us both, capturing that raw moment of joy and relief. Seeing my 2 daughters together for the first time, the weight of it all hit me, and I felt tears slipping down my face. "Grandma, Grandpa, come meet my sister," Ella called out. We spent the next hour talking together as a family until Ginger's doctor entered with a smile. "My mother and I are both perfect matches for Ginger," I announced, barely able to believe it. Dr. Proctor asked if we were ready to check in for surgery at 6 a.m. the next morning, and my dad and I both nodded, whispering, "Thank God." We prayed for a miracle all the way up here. Ginger looked concerned. "Don't you need my parents' permission?" she asked. "Under ordinary circumstances, yes," Dr. Proctor replied. "But thanks to Mr. Roberts, we received a court order allowing us to proceed if he or a relative was a match. The judge felt your mother and her husband weren't acting in your best interests. Mr. Roberts is covering any costs beyond insurance." Ella leaned over and grinned. "I'm not surprised, sis. After what Mom and Stanley pulled, Dad had no choice but to use the courts to make sure there were no delays." Just then, a security guard stepped in to let us know that CNN was about to run a segment on us. Ginger turned on the TV to see a profile on me as the author of a popular book series, valued at around $40 million. My parents looked over at me in shock. They'd always thought I was just an independent corporate financial advisor. "My God, Dad," Ginger gasped wide-eyed. "I've read all your books. They're amazing." I chuckled. After my life fell apart, I had to rebuild from scratch. Writing was a kind of therapy for me. When my first book succeeded, it changed everything. Since then, I've written on current events, exposing the truth and questioning morals, even when it ruffled feathers. For the first time in 15 years, I checked into a hospital room alongside my mom, who couldn't have been prouder. Ella wanted to share my room, but security regulations wouldn't allow it. so she bounced between rooms that night, catching up with family. My dad called relatives to give updates as everything unfolded. Diana and Stanley arrived late after work, greeted by a room filled with cold stares. Ginger, calm and collected, informed them of her scheduled surgery, a double bone marrow transplant that would take place the next morning due to a court order. How? Diana stammered, struggling to process. Mom, Ginger explained smoothly, my biological dad and his mother are both perfect matches, and they're donating so I can get better. Ginger wasn't done yet. She turned to her mother with a grin and asked, Mom, you're a big fan of John Whitaker's books, right? Well, that's actually the pen name of my real dad, Albert Roberts. Diana and Stanley went pale. They'd hoped this would all quietly go away, but Albert's success and financial stability proved he wasn't chasing after money. He was here for justice. He'd always believed in truth and fairness, the very values that had made him a great agent before Diana's father destroyed his career. Mom, Ginger continued, did you know Grandpa's been in FBI custody all day? You might want to check with Grandma to see if he's home. Care to explain why? Ella was somewhere in the hospital, either in my room or with Grandma Roberts, if Diana and Stanley wanted to confront her. At that moment, a security guard knocked on my door and poked his head in. Mr. Roberts, do you know these two? He asked. Ella, catching on, opened the door wide and said, Miss Fiancée, see my ring? She gestured toward Rachel, who entered behind her. Dad, I wouldn't trust these two for a minute. They're just trying to cover their backs now. You don't know half of it, Ella, Rachel said. Your dad's lawyer has video evidence of your stepfather accepting a check from your grandfather to break up your parents' marriage. The arrangement included him managing your grandparents' finances for a 3% annual fee if he succeeded. Diana's face paled. How do you know this is real? She demanded. And who are you? Mom, Ella replied coolly. This is Dad's fiancée, Rachel Harris, and she's a top-notch researcher. I trust her more than you. Diana's face drained of color as the reality set in. Her daughters were slipping away, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Rachel spoke with complete confidence, and I backed her up. I told my lawyer to release every video and audio recording we had to the FBI, including a letter from Diana's father admitting he paid for the recordings out of spite. He didn't care about the cost or who he hurt to get what he wanted, I said, locking eyes with Diana. She turned to Stanley, desperately searching for denial, but his guilty expression was all the confirmation she needed. In that moment, Diana realized that when I walked away, she had lost the only man who truly cared for her. Rachel gave her a hard look. A piece of advice, Diana, don't let anyone manipulate you. Rachel turned to me, her voice softening. Albert, I need to talk to you alone after the surgery. For now, I need some time to think. Ella, would you walk me to my car? I'll be back soon, Dad. Mom, and I have a few things to sort out. She turned to Rachel. Stay with him until I get back, okay? Rachel and I watched them leave, and as soon as Diana thought she was out of sight, she broke down, her shoulders shaking with grief. She was finally coming to terms with the reality of what she and her father had set in motion. Stanley, the man who'd always had life handed to him, stood there frozen, paralyzed by fear and shame. The truth had shattered everything they'd built, and Diana's trust in him was gone. With a heavy sigh, Stanley turned to me. Albert, I've dreaded this day. I never thought you'd actually come back. If we'd run into each other by chance, I could have turned the other way. He looked down, unable to meet my eyes. I didn't see any of this coming. I think it's best I leave before saying anything more. He walked off without another word, leaving Rachel and me in silence. As I turned to Rachel, I saw something in her expression I hadn't noticed before, a blush rising to her cheeks and a glimmer of affection. I felt myself opening up to her in a way I hadn't with anyone in years. The real question was whether she was just supporting me as a friend, or if she was starting to reveal her true feelings, too. Either way, my daughters had awakened something in me I'd long buried. I realized I'd been living on the sidelines, finding my happiness in the joy of others rather than creating my own. Rachel, I said quietly, we should talk once I'm out of recovery. These last few days have made me realize I've been too comfortable playing it safe, staying out of the game. Rachel looked at me, her eyes shining. Albert, when I got divorced, you stepped in. My kids were still young, and you became more of a dad to them than their own father ever was. From Little League games to father-daughter dances, you were there for all of it. I know why you pay me more than most assistants get. It's so the kids who found a place in your heart are well taken care of. She smiled, shaking her head. On their birthdays, you went all out, making them the envy of their friends. Every summer, you took us on trips, making sure they had memories they'd hold on to for life. You've been more than a friend, more than a boss. You've been family. You love them, and they love you, Albert. The only thing holding you back has always been that fear of commitment. I started to respond, but my voice caught. She was right, and her words hit me deep. Taking a breath, I walked over, sat beside her, and took her hand, looking in her eyes as I finally gathered my thoughts. Diana betrayed me, her father intimidated me, and my best friend stabbed me in the back. I've spent my life just trying to stay safe, surviving the constant threats from them. I've been in self-protection mode until a few days ago. But now that I've figured it out, would you go on a real date with me? Or is it too late for us? Rachel's eyes softened, and with a smile, she said, "Took you long enough, you old fool," before leaning in to kiss me. I'm texting the kids to tell them we're officially a couple. Confident, are we? I laughed. Smiling, I texted Ella to check in. I thanked her and asked if everything was okay. She texted back, "Mom didn't know. She's taking it pretty hard and won't be coming back tonight. Let Ginger know." With that, Rachel and I headed up to Ginger's room. Introducing Rachel as my girlfriend, I filled Ginger in on everything that had happened, showing her Ella's text. We just finished when my sister Heidi walked in, curiosity sparking in her eyes. "I had to meet her," Heidi said with a grin. "Rachel, what are you doing here?" I laughed, cutting in. I was going to say something, but Heidi figured it out first. Heidi chuckled, giving me a playful nudge. "He finally caught on, didn't he? Took him long enough." She turned to Ginger. "This is your Aunt Heidi, and coming in right behind her is your Uncle Mike, her husband. You'll learn quickly that in this family, we speak our minds, like it or not." I slipped out to the nurse's station and texted Ella, asking what kind of pizza Ginger liked. She replied, "Anything but anchovies." So I ordered 3 extra-large pizzas and 3 2-liter sodas for quick delivery. Then I called Dad and asked him to bring Mom up in about 30 minutes for a pizza party. Sure, we were bending the no, eating for 8 hours before surgery rule, but the excitement of the family reunion got the best of us. The head nurse came in to remind us of the hospital rules, but ended up leaving with a slice of pizza herself. Later, she stopped me and said, "What you did lifted everyone's spirits on this floor. Thank you." Around 4 a.m., they prepped me and my mom for surgery. We held hands and supported each other until we were finally wheeled into the OR. I stayed awake as long as I could, feeling a strange calm as the medication finally kicked in. When I woke up, the procedure was done. Dr. Proctor told everyone the transplant had gone well, but that we'd need to wait a few hours to see if Ginger's body would accept it. Thankfully it did. The family, feeling relieved, began preparing to head home. Rachel laughed and told me my mom was doing well. Once she was sure I was stable, she handed me my phone. The first texts I saw were from Rachel's kids, both asking when she'd get her engagement ring and when they'd get to meet their new sisters. "Rachel, your kids are sharp," I said, showing her the messages. She smiled, her eyes tearing up. I told them I was here to look after you after the surgery, and of course, they had a million questions. When I told them the whole story, they weren't even surprised. They said, "Mom, he's always treated us like his own." Most of their friends envy them for having you as their dad, Rachel added, glancing at the messages. "To them, you've always been their real father." "Well," I said, grinning, "I guess we won't need a long engagement." Rachel smiled, nodding. "Ella and her mom are with Ginger. She's holding up well. Even though she's still on meds, she's full of questions." Rachel added, "Ella told her about the pizza party. Ginger's so amazed at how much she looks like her aunt and grandma. She's already planning a girls' day with them once she's up for it." "Give me my pants," I said, determined. "I need to see her for myself and check on Mom." The nurses tried to hold me back, insisting it was too soon after surgery, but I wasn't having it. Off we went hand in hand. Miraculously, the pain was manageable. Rachel and I immediately noticed the difference in Ginger. Her complexion was brighter, and there was a sparkle in her eyes that nearly brought me to tears. Who are Laura and Daniel Harris? Ella asked, looking curious. Rachel laughed. They're my kids. Laura's 13 and Daniel's 11. Why do you ask? Yagarin. They just sent me a Facebook friend request this morning. We all laughed, feeling the warmth of a family that, despite years of separation, had somehow come together. For the first time, it felt like the shadows of the past were truly starting to lift. So did Ginger, Ella added, smiling as she glanced at her phone. You both should read what they sent me, I said, handing my phone to Ella. She read the messages, grinning, and then passed the phone to Ginger. Hey, I need that back, I chuckled, so I can add their numbers to my contacts. Just then, Diana approached, looking hesitant. Albert, could we talk privately? She asked, her voice softer than usual. I nodded, and we walked to the waiting room, where she took a deep breath before speaking. Albert, I talked to my mother last night. She admitted she remembered Dad's intense hatred for you, but she never thought he'd go this far. My daughters have decided they want to finish the school year here and then move in with you. They also want to change their last name to yours. They feel that what Stanley and I did is unforgivable. She paused, her eyes downcast. And honestly, I can't argue with them. They even told me they'd take me to court if I didn't let them go. They don't trust me anymore, and I don't blame them. Will you take them? I took a breath, feeling the weight of her words. You know, my family would never let me say no, even if I wanted to. Rachel and I will welcome them with open arms. We'll just need a bigger place, that's all. I'll drop the lawsuit against you if you agree to joint custody. I offered, feeling a surprising amount of sympathy for her. But the suit against the rest of your family will continue. The girls are old enough to decide the rest. Diana agreed to the arrangement, though she declined my offer to pay for the name change. We returned to Ginger's room, and both girls looked up, eyes full of hope. Rachel, it looks like we're going to need a house with at least 6 bedrooms, I said with a grin. Rachel smiled, and the girls squealed in delight. Diana turned to them. Girls, your father and I agreed that you'll get what you want. If Rachel's on board, I'll call the lawyer tomorrow to start the process for your name change. Albert, Rachel asked, giving me a sideways glance. Are you ready for this? A house full of teenagers. I laughed. No one's ever truly ready, but we'll adapt. I'm just getting used to the idea of 2 kids carrying my name. Make that 4, Rachel said, her smile widening. Laura and Tim want you to adopt them too. They've already started signing their names as Roberts. I chuckled, feeling a surge of warmth. Call James Baker's firm to get the paperwork started, and let's text the kids to share our plans. We'll need to find out which areas have the best schools, so we can look for a new home. Ella took out her phone, dialed, and put it on speaker. Hello, came a voice on the other end. Who's this? This is Ella, your soon-to-be older sister. Is Daniel with you? Prove it, Laura said suspiciously. I can't just take your word for it. Seriously, is this a prank? Rachel laughed and jumped in. Laura, it's me, Rachel. You're talking to Albert's daughter, Ella. We're all going to be Robertses soon. Ginger and I are changing our last names, and your dad is starting the process to adopt you both. Awesome. Tell Dad it's about time. How's Ginger? Daniel chimed in. We've been waiting to hear. Rachel and I exchanged a look, our hands entwined as we watched the kids connect for the first time. I'm getting better, Ginger replied. So far, so good. I'll text you both so you can add my number. Ginger, Ella, our dad is the only father we've known. Our bio dad was out of the picture before we even knew him. Your dad has been better than any of our friends' parents. Mom's been in love with him for as long as I can remember. When we're all together, we're going to be siblings. Nothing more, nothing less, Daniel added firmly. Laura and I won't let anything mess up our family. My daughters nodded in agreement, and Rachel, her eyes brimming with tears, looked at me with a smile. They've embraced your values, Albert. You should be proud of them. I am, I replied, feeling a swell of pride that I hadn't felt in years. We said our goodbyes for the moment and made our way to visit my mom. When we walked into her room, Dad was by her side, and both of them looked up in surprise. Mom, I began, smiling at the sight of her already sitting up. Have you seen Ginger? How is she? She's doing better, Mom replied, her expression brightening. Her color's back, and she's in good spirits, but of course it's early. Mom, Dad, we need to have a talk, I said, glancing at Rachel. Go ahead. We're not going anywhere, my dad said, his eyes keen with curiosity. Ginger and Ella will be moving in with me after the school year. They want to change their last name to Roberts, I explained. Diana agreed to joint custody, and the girls are determined to make it official. Wonderful news! They both exclaimed in unison, their smiles wide. But that's not all, Rachel added, looking at my mom with a twinkle in her eye. Your son's decided to make an honest woman out of me. Margaret, are you up for helping to plan a wedding? Mom's eyes filled with tears as she clasped her hands to her heart, and Dad's grin spread from ear to ear. They didn't need to say a word. It was clear they approved. I added, I'll be adopting Laura and Daniel, too, and they'll take my last name. Rachel, and I will start looking for a house as soon as we're back. Dad chuckled. What finally made you come to your senses, son? We've all known how you felt about Rachel. I've been trying to convince your mother to let me knock some sense into you. Evan Roberts? Mom scolded him playfully. You're not in the car lot now. She turned to Rachel, her eyes shining. Have you thought about the wedding plans? Rachel looked thoughtful. We haven't discussed it much, but since we're blending families, I want to make it a family affair. Heidi can be my maid of honor, Albert's best man, his brothers-in-law as ushers, Ginger and Ella as bridesmaids, Laura as the flower girl, and Daniel as the ring bearer. Dad, would you walk me down the aisle, along with my own father? That depends on who's footing the bill and whether Jack Daniels will be at the reception, Dad joked with a laugh. Rachel turned to me. What do you think, Albert? It sounds perfect, I said, feeling a deep sense of joy. If that's what you want, let's make it happen. Then I paused, my thoughts turning back. Should we invite Diana? I wondered aloud. My parents both shook their heads firmly. No, Albert, Mom said softly. She's caused enough harm. I nodded, and then, gathering my thoughts, I said, Mom, Dad, in the coming weeks, a lot is going to come out in the media. I'm suing the federal government, Diana's parents, and Stanley. As for Diana, I believe she was a victim as much as I was. I paid the price years ago, and now she's paying it in ways we can't even begin to understand. She thinks she's lost her daughters forever. My mom took my hand, her face filled with compassion. You've always done the right thing, Albert. You did right by those girls, and you're doing right by this family. No matter what happens next, we're with you. I squeezed her hand, my heart brimming with gratitude. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace settling in. Maybe inviting her could help the twins reconnect and heal together. Letting them move on from everything that happened, I suggested. Rachel and my parents stared at me, genuinely taken aback. Where did you get that wisdom from? My dad asked, sounding both surprised and impressed. I shrugged, holding Rachel's hand, and replied, These last few days taught me a lot. Ella's sudden presence had opened my eyes to what really matters in life. Exhausted from the surgery, I was back in my room and fell asleep almost immediately. Rachel stayed with me, catching up on the news. Turns out, Christopher Thompson and Stanley Quinn were in serious trouble. They'd been arrested for lying to the FBI. The mastermind who had put a target on my back was now cooperating with the authorities. My lawyer had also released details about my dismissal from the FBI, sparking an internal investigation. When I woke up, Rachel filled me in. Dr. Proctor told us my mom and I would be cleared to go home the next day. You'll need follow-ups. And those stitches out, he warned. Ginger's doing better than expected, but the real test will be how she responds as we start weaning her off the meds. We chatted with my parents, who had decided to stay in town until Ginger showed solid signs of recovery, planning to fly back with us on a private jet. Dad checked into the same hotel as Rachel, and we let the bus driver know he could head back in a few days. Meanwhile, the media had picked apart the whole mess, revealing the backstabbing and lies that had destroyed my marriage and career. They spent an entire day exposing how Diana's father had twisted things around, making her believe lies. Diana was under heavy public scrutiny now. Rachel and I planned one last visit to see Ginger before heading home. Dr. Proctor was thrilled, saying she was on a solid road to recovery. And then, out of nowhere, my publisher got approval on my security clearance. Someone high up must not have liked the bad press about the FBI's past dealings with me. Soon, over 1 million copies of my new book would hit the shelves. I had 2 first editions rushed to me overnight, signed them, and then Rachel wrapped them up and hid them in a shopping bag for a surprise. We made sure Ella would be there for the visit. That's when Rachel dropped a little bombshell, grinning as she said, "Your dad and I have set the wedding date for the first weekend in August. Aunt Heidi will be my maid of honor, and I'd love it if you two would be my bridesmaids." Ginger's face lit up with pure joy. "Absolutely, Rachel. When I first walked into Dad's office, I was so scared. But you knew who I was right away and said, 'You're Diana's daughter. How are we going to handle this?' I couldn't believe you accepted me so quickly. I'd be honored to be in your wedding, and I'd be so happy to call you Mom." The 3 of them hugged, and Ginger practically leaped out of bed from excitement. When things settled down, I pulled out the gifts and handed each one of them a signed first edition of my book. Inside, I'd written, "To one of the 2 prettiest ladies who call me Dad, with love, John Whitaker or Albert Roberts." Ginger's face lit up with pride as she unwrapped it, seeing it was my biggest book yet, over 600 pages, and not even officially out. She opened the cover, read my message, and burst into tears. "Dad, you've already done so much for me. I didn't need this," she sobbed, running into my arms. "Before you came into my life, the doctor said I only had a few days left." Ella knew that too, but somehow she went into the attic, and I'm so grateful because it led us to you. She hugged me tight, and Ella, watching nearby, had tears in her eyes too. "Dad, Dr. Proctor believes that if Ginger had only gotten 1 transplant, it wouldn't have worked. The double transplant forced her body to respond. She's already gained 10 pounds in just 6 days," Ella shared. "I didn't know if you'd come, but you didn't hesitate. You brought the whole family. Because of that, I'm getting my best friend back. How's your mom handling everything?" I asked, trying to ease the mood a bit. She filed for divorce and started therapy to work through all the lies she's lived with. "She now understands what you went through and feels ashamed," Ginger said quietly. She said only someone who's experienced it could understand how it's a living nightmare. Her work and friends are her support now, but learning to trust again, that's going to be tough for her. "Ella, trust is a hard thing to rebuild, even with family support. It can take years and often requires a leap of faith," I said. For me, that moment came when Ella walked through my office door. Rachel chuckled, adding, "Thank God you did. Albert had me thinking I'd grow old waiting for him." "Okay, girls, stand with your dad so I can snap a few pictures. I want the best one in an 8x10 for his desk." When we got off the plane, Rachel's parents and kids were there to greet us. Her kids nearly knocked me down with excitement, their joy catching on to everyone around. My dad chuckled, watching them call me Dad, and I realized that Daniel would have 2 older sisters and a younger one, just like I did growing up. Laura gave my mom a big hug, saying, "I'm so happy you're becoming my grandmother." Life was changing fast, blessing me in ways I hadn't expected. Rachel and I decided to hold off on a few of our original plans until after the wedding. She had a good sense of what we needed in a home, so I trusted her to take charge of the search, giving me time to work on my first fiction novel. My previous books had exposed corruption and cover-ups, so this was a refreshing change. We stayed in close contact with the twins, and eventually, Rachel found a stunning 20-acre property with an old barn that could use some sprucing up. Ginger's health improved enough for her to return to school part-time, and we hired an architect to design our dream home. It would have a steel and brick frame, outdoor kitchen, large patio, pool, and a 4-bay garage. With Rachel cutting back her office hours, I had more time to write, and with the help of an editor, I completed over 300 pages, publishing my first book under my real name. Diana used my lawyer to divorce Stanley, securing alimony and coverage for education expenses. My cases had moved to mediation, and the opposition had mostly lost their fight. Finally, Laura, Daniel, Rachel, and I eagerly waited for the twins' arrival after their last day of school. Daniel spotted their car pulling up our new driveway, and we all rushed out to greet them. When they stepped out of the car, I was floored by how well Ginger looked. She was a perfect mirror image of Ella. Rachel whispered, "We'll figure it out." Daniel, stepping into the role of protective big brother, took their bags as Rachel proudly showed off the house.